Shankar IAS Academy.
Good morning. I'm your host, Dr. Vijila Kennedy, Principal of Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science. I welcome you to the webinar series, Nation Building Through Civil Services, from August 20, which aims to empower the future leaders of the nation through relations with the civil servants, policymakers, and change leaders. The webinar series is hosted by Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, Coimbatore, in partnership with Shankar IAS Academy, Chennai, and Takshashila Institutions, Bengaluru. And all these three institutions excel in their domains and make an impact in the nation. Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, KCLAS, offers the most unique liberal arts education, including degree programs in political science, psychology, and visual communication. And the college also hosts a Kumaraguru Civil Services Academy in partnership with Shankar IAS Academy, where our students are trained and mentored for civil services. Shankar IAS Academy coaches and mentors aspiring civil servants, and very proud to say that in the recently declared UPSC CSE results, 201 students of Shankar IAS Academy cleared the exams. That is almost 25% of the total results declared. Congratulations to Shankar IAS Academy, who is our partner. Takshashila Institution is an independent center for research and education in public policy. And we are very happy to say that they are a partner, academic partner with Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science. For today's session, we are happy to present the third talk in the webinar series on the topic, Emerging Dimensions of India's Foreign Policy. I think a very significant topic in today's context with very many national and global changes which are happening around us. To quickly tell you the format of the session, we will have an in-depth presentation on the topic for 1 hour, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A. And please post your questions on the comment box. The session is live streamed in FB and YouTube of KCLAS, and also YouTube of Shankar IAS Academy. We welcome all the participants for the conversation on emerging dimensions of India's foreign policy, which will be presented by Mr. T P Sreenivasan, IFS. We are very honored to have you here, sir, for this conversation, and we are indeed delighted that participants can benefit out of your wisdom and your experience. To introduce Mr. T P Sreenivasan, he was a former permanent representative of India to UN, Vienna, and former executive director of India of International Atomic Energy Agencies, and ambassador to Australia and Slovenia between 2000 and 2004. He has served in the Indian Foreign Service for 37 years, and his previous postings were from 1997 to 2000, he was the Deputy Chief of Mission in the Embassy of India, Washington. 95 to 97 High Commissioner of India to Kenya and Permanent Representative of India to the UN in Nairobi. 92 to 95 Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Representative of India to UN, New York. 86 to 89 Ambassador to Fiji and 8 other South Pacific island states. He has also served in New Delhi, Tokyo, Thimphu, Moscow, New York, and Yangon. From 2009 to 12, Mr. Sreenivasan was the Executive Director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Vienna. He was a member of the National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India. He was also the Vice Chairman and the Executive Head of Kerala State Higher Education Council. He is presently the Chairman of the Academic Council and Director of NSS Civil Services Academy and Director General of Kerala International Center and advisor to AsiaNet's weekly international program. He is also a writer. He writes articles regularly in various national and international publications. And he has written 4 books, I think books for us to read. The 4 books are Words, 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 Adventures in Diplomacy, Encounters, Mattering to India, the Shashi Tharoor Campaign and Applied Diplomacy through the Prism of Mythology. So we have a fantastic, experienced professional, a very senior person who has led the country in different domains, and a writer and intellect, and he brings in a very rich experience. And we are very honored to have you here, sir, for this webinar. I cordially welcome you, and I hand over the session to Mr. Sreenivasan to deliver the talk on the topic, Emerging Dimensions of India's Foreign Policy. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Principal, for introducing me with such generous words. And I know I've come to you through the Shankar IAS Academy, with which I have a very close relationship. Chandrasekhar is a good friend for many years. And I do go there, though they are our competitors in Trivandrum. It doesn't prevent us from working with them. And I congratulate them on their success. We too had our own successes, but I won't talk about it because it is nowhere near the Shankar Academy. But we also contribute substantially to the list of 1,000 that you have before you. So this is a very good opportunity and good of you to have hosted me, because I enjoy nothing more than talking about foreign policy, talking about education. And I have at least 2 webinars a day. That is my regular schedule these days, since we cannot travel, we cannot go to institutions. So this has become even easier and better in a sense, because without leaving my desk, I'm able to address you. So maybe one of the curses of the pandemic has now become a blessing in a sense, because this is what humanity is all about. We always overcome whatever happens and then turn it to our advantage. And so this webinar is an institution now which is born out of the pandemic, but is bringing us closer rather than distancing us from each other. So thank you very much for that. And the subject chosen also is very interesting, because we are not going to talk about history. History will come in the context of what we are talking about, which is the emerging trends. And a very good way to start with is 2020, because 2020 started several things. And in history, 2020 may be recorded as Queen Elizabeth said about 1997, annus horribilis. Remember, in 1997, there were so many misfortunes to the royalty in UK, including the death of Princess Diana. So she said, at the end of it, said, this year was our annus horribilis. And that is how I think 2020 will be remembered, the year of horrors. And it started right from the beginning, and it is not ended yet. So we're all looking forward to departure of 2020. And the height of the irony is that the best president that we ever had Dr. Abdul Kalam had spoken about 2020 as the year of hope for India. We all remember that. He kept saying that India will be a superpower or at least a developed nation by 2020. That is where we are heading. Of course, he knew that it was not going to be perfect. He knew that this may not happen because he knows what a superpower is. But his idea was to give us all a hope to aspire to something and also use it as a kind of benchmark to see where have we reached in 2020. So that's a bit of irony that 2020, instead of reaching some new heights, we have really plunged like every other nation in the world. The world's superpowers are having difficulty gasping for breath like many human beings. So it has been a terrible 2020 for us this year. If we can erase out of history, it might be very good, but it cannot go. We have to live through it and we have to learn lessons from it. And if one thing that has been affected most is foreign policy of every country, it is like when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989-90. Nobody expected it. And India, as you know, had very good relations with the Soviet Union. And suddenly when the Soviet Union collapsed, nobody knew what to do, particularly India. Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. I was working with him those days. And he was so shocked, almost like Jawaharlal Nehru in 1962 when the Chinese invaded us. But Mr. Narasimha Rao had the presence of mind and the capacity to change Indian foreign policy all around in order to survive. And he did it very well. His 100th birth anniversary was recently celebrated, but he's an underestimated Prime Minister because what he has done to recover from the collapse of the Soviet Union is most remarkable, but then he was not such a showy or egoistic person. So only those who have worked with him know exactly what we went through. A similar challenge has now come to India once again. And we have a very able, a very well elected, he has had a majority better than many other prime ministers of India. And so we are in charge. The government is in control. The Prime Minister is capable of dealing with a number of crises and trying to figure out the best policy for India. Of course, it must have come as a disappointment to him that in his second term, the early second term has been somewhat ruined by what has happened. But anyway, so we have to start from the beginning. And the first crisis that struck us in 2020 was the assassination of Major General Soleimani. Most unexpectedly, it looked like an ordinary incident in the sense that the Americans do go and kill generals and others to change regimes. But the way Soleimani was killed by a pinpoint bombing on a running car in the back seat was dramatic and historic by a country which is somewhere else in another country, Iraq. So this was a real sure recipe for disaster because Iran is known to be a very, very forceful country, very self-respecting, never compromising kind of fundamentalist government. And everybody feared that there would be a regional war, at least, if not global war. And that is how we started. It was a real mind-boggling incident for India, for the whole world. And particularly because the man in charge in the United States is totally unpredictable. We do not know what he will do next. And therefore, we had a very tense moments at that time. And that was the first crisis that we faced in 2020. I said crisis because we have major interests in both the United States and Iran. Of course, we'll come to all these details later. But we had to deal with this crisis very effectively because it could have marked the end of a civilization of an era in world history if there was going to be an all-out war. It had all the makings of it. And President Trump was very conscious of it also, and he was ready to face that. But how was it controlled? How is it that it did not break out into a war? And that shows something about what we have learned in the past. We have just observed the 50th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I believe, and I'm going to write my weekly column this week on that. And those were the bombs which would ever be dropped in history. There will not be any more nuclear weapons attack. It cannot happen. Of course, thousands of people lost their lives. There was disaster in Japan, and even today there are generations suffering. But because of that particular bombing, humanity has learned a lesson. Of course, we are not given up our nuclear weapons. Everybody is building nuclear weapons, including us, but they will never be used. And they cannot be used because the Americans experimented with the bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. At a time when the United States was desperate, Germany had already surrendered, and Japan was still bombing American installations. And they told them, finally, they gave them an ultimatum, and still they did not respond. And that was when this happened. But the disaster, destruction that took place at that time was so huge that no human being ever be able to touch a nuclear button anymore. But that doesn't mean that there will be no war. That doesn't mean that there will be weapons gathered all around the world. But the nature of it has changed. So the next war will not be fought with bombs. They will be fought with handheld mobile phones. Mobile phones will not be the same 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Just as the mobile phones we had 5 years ago were not anything near to what you have today. So the nature of warfare has changed. People are now focusing on how to destroy a nation without destroying the people. You don't need to. What China has done, if it has done the virus, we do not know whether China really engineered the virus. But what has it done? It has completely changed humanity without firing a shot. Right? So whether it was created by China or China intelligently made use of it, we know what the future wars will be like. There will be no explosions. Buildings will not collapse. But humanity will die a slow death by chemical weapons, by biological weapons, by viruses, etc. And therefore, no war broke out. But the impact of this continued throughout the year. Iran, we have civilizationally very good relations. But after all, Iran is an Islamic country, and therefore it stays with the Islamic countries, particularly Pakistan, whenever there is a crisis comes. But our policy towards Iran is very significant because much of our oil supplies come from Iran. At the same time, with the United States, we had excellent relations till the end of the Obama era, 2016. And after President Trump came to power, situation changed so dramatically that we could not depend on this friend anymore. But of course, Mr. Modi handled Mr. Trump sufficiently well. So we had the Howdy Modi and so Namaste Trump, etc., which created a good feeling in the US relations. So we had to protect India-US relations on the one hand, and we had to protect our interests in Iran, which was a major challenge for us. And at the same time, US-Russia relations crumbled and collapsed. And there again, even though the Soviet Union is not there and it is now Russia, we are still dependent on the Soviet Union for 60 to 70% of our weapons because of history. All those linkages that we have with Russia today are called grandfather linkages. Like, for example, Kudankulam. How is Kudankulam functioning in India today? There is no single foreign nuclear reactor other than Kudankulam in India. That was not our intention. India-US nuclear deal was meant to liberalize our import of reactors, liberalize our export of our own reactors, and a major deal, a major nuclear trade was envisaged under the India-US nuclear deal. But nothing happened. We haven't got any reactors from the United States. And whose fault was it? Our fault, because Indian Parliament passed a law which is against international conventions. It said that yes, we will import all these reactors, but God forbid if something happens to this reactor, any reactor, the suppliers must pay compensation. Never heard of. If you buy a car and you go and crash against a tree, will the Toyota company pay for it? It is a nut behind the wheel, as they say, the drivers. They are responsible for it, not the car. So, in that circumstance, when we insisted that any compensation which may arise out of nuclear damage, the responsibility will be of the supplier. No suppliers came. But since Russia had started it during the Soviet days and was here under the grandfather clause, we are able to continue. A similar situation, even now, even Abhinandan, we're talking about it to our friend just now. He shot down F-16 aircraft with an old MiG aircraft. And that shows the extent of our dependence on Russia. And then United States collapsed. The S-400 missiles that we had ordered from Russia went into a danger because United States said that unless you cancel this agreement, we will impose sanctions against you. So here was this crisis at the very beginning of 2020. We had to deal with these three countries contradictory to each other, which we have vital interests. And how do we get over this? And that is where the emergence of new trends in foreign policy comes. That's why I wanted to introduce the subject with this particular context. Otherwise, people say, oh, foreign policy is never static, it is dynamic, it has to change with the situation, etc. But there was no better illustration of the challenges of foreign policy for India than this apparently minor incident of the killing of a man, of a general in Iran. But how did we survive it? The Americans came to India and said, stop your deals with Iran, stop your deals with Russia, or stop our deals with us. You take your choice. But we didn't have to do that. We managed it because of the history of Indian diplomacy, because of the resilience of our foreign policy. We dealt with the Iranians. We, of course, reduced imports of oil. It was impossible otherwise. We would not be able to pay them for it because international banks will not cooperate with us. So we had to reduce it. We had to tell the Russians that regardless of what happens to us, we will buy your S-400 missiles. And we told the Americans that we have bilateral relations and we have interests in each other. India is not going to do anything against the interests of the United States. And therefore, finally, what happened was that the United States began to depend on us on dealing with Iran and Russia. Because of the good relations that we had with Iran and Russia came in handy for us to build our good relations with the United States. Will anybody believe that? So that is the kind of challenge we had, and we are continuing. And that was an illustration of the efficacy of India's foreign policy, the determination of the Prime Minister, and of course, skillful diplomats who are able to administer a new policy which would help India. And then came, of course, unknown to us, the coronavirus was already born in Wuhan. COVID is 19, not 20. Remember that. Because by the time 2020 opened and we were engaged in all these critical situations for us, coronavirus was already causing damage in China. We don't know how it came about, whether it was the meat market of China or it is the laboratories of Wuhan Wherever it is came. And that is an open question. As they say, the jury is still out. We don't have a decision. And this, we did not realize the seriousness of it at that time because the Chinese gave out no figures. There were some pictures shown of patients being dragged from their hospital beds. We did not know what. And now they suspect that they were shooting patients who were old people because they had to vacate the beds for the younger people. Can you imagine a situation like that? But the Chinese did not tell us that. They told the World Health Organization after 3 months that yes, there is a coronavirus. By then it had become a pandemic. So the purpose, objective of foreign policy, internal policy, all policies, spirituality, everything came to one issue. What is it? Survival. That's all. Today, what is success? For any human being, what is success today? To survive, that's all. If you don't survive, it doesn't matter to you what happens to the world. So it is an existential threat to humanity. And no foreign policy, no domestic policy, no nuclear weapons, none of this is going to help us. So our focus shifted from becoming a superpower as Dr. Abdul Kalam had predicted or hoped. Survival becomes the issue. And how did India's foreign policy help in this survival is the question. We were very careful. We never accused China of anything. Day one onwards, we started asking China what we could do to help. And whatever they asked, we gave them, including ventilators were given to the Chinese. But when we went to the WHO, when the whole question was being debated and demand was being made by the United States to investigate the Chinese, we could not move away from that. But then the other members themselves decided not to investigate, but just to review. And the Chinese accepted that. And at the same time, people wanted Taiwan to be brought in because Taiwan had done a good job. But good job was not enough. Taiwan is not acceptable to China. And therefore, we did not press the point with China that Taiwan should be admitted. So on the one hand, we conceded to China on Taiwan. But on the other hand, we supported the resolution supported by 122 countries, of which India was one, against China, that it should be reviewed their situation, which Chinese have not forgotten. So, but what did we expect? We expect the Chinese to be on the defensive because they are being accused of A, B, C, D. WHO may have been on its side. WHO lost its US membership and the money. Very grave situation for WHO. But we expected the Chinese to be on the defensive. Initially they were. They quickly declared that, we handled the virus. We may have killed a million people, but doesn't matter. We have controlled it. And initially they started trying to help out others. They sent us also masks and medicines and ventilators, etc., etc. And so China said that instead of fighting this argument in the international bodies, the best is to build on their existing relationships with these countries. And what is China's relationship with these countries? It is not ideological. It is not military. But it is basically flooding them with gifts. That is the Chinese foreign policy is all about. Why is it that Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Pakistan, everybody is more friendly to China than to India? Is it their communism? Is there something with India as a multi-religious, multi-ethnic community? All these countries were friendly to us a few years ago when China was in difficulties. But what they have done is to shoot bullets at them, but those bullets were made of silver. But they didn't realize they were bullets that were hitting them. They thought it was nice silver hitting them. And one after the other, all our good neighbors who were friendly to us turned against us. Imagine Nepal saying that we are ready to go to war with India. Can you ever imagine that? Imagine Nepal is the only Hindu country in the world. So some people who want India to be a Hindu country are looking at Nepal as a model. And that Nepal committing aggression against China, cartographic aggression. In the old days, it was very, very serious. If somebody produces a map showing your country as part of the other country, you can go to war with them. That was the situation. But now with the internet, there's no way you can control any map. Anybody can produce any map. And we don't care about it. All Chinese maps show Arunachal Pradesh as China's territory. Pakistan shows Jammu and Kashmir as their territory. But why should we bother? But for Nepal to say that this part is Nepal's and produce a map and get it approved by the parliament of Nepal, if it is not aggression, what is it? All because Chinese money. And I'm sure all of you have, those who are writing the civil service examination, one thing that they should know is what is this BRI? You know, the huge Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. What is that initiative for? This is to dominate the world. They are building communications facilities from Beijing to everywhere in the world directly, including Europe. All roads should lead to Beijing. And virtually every country in the world has joined except India. So we have to be careful, we have to be cautious. So they have turned the whole of our neighborhood against us. And they are telling us that unless you join the BRI, we will flood you with all these roads and belts and so on all around you, that you will look like a traffic policeman sitting in the middle and controlling the traffic, of which you have no control. This is the threat that China is holding out to us. It is not the border alone. Why I am going into China so much is because that is the test that we are facing today. So the first impact of coronavirus or COVID-19 is the way in which the Chinese have responded to it. So they started that. First they did that, be a good boy, trying to help everybody. So they thought they would make an impact. But that didn't make much of an impact in terms of their political ambitions. And therefore, they decided to flex their muscles. What is their objective? Their objective is because they are dreaming of a vacuum in the world left by the biggest power in the world, the United States. Of course, it looks like the United States is withdrawing from everything. That was President Trump's policy. America first. I don't care about anybody else. How many international treaties that he withdrew from? Climate change, trade agreements, Cuba, Iran. No country does that. Just because government has changed, you don't change treaties and relationships like that. So, United States has given this indication that they are not interested. But for the Chinese to think that there is a vacuum being generated, and therefore China has an opportunity to step in is the challenge that we are facing today in our foreign policy. Because, like George Fernandez said many years ago, he said our number one enemy is China, not Pakistan. Of course, the government of India as such has never said such thing. But those words still reverberate, at least in my ears, all the time whenever I hear about China. Prime Minister of India has met President Xi Jinping 15 times in 5 years. He has been to China 5 times. Will you go to a friend like that? So what were we trying to do? We were trying to make sure that we have a steady relationship with China, not entirely on our terms. And that is why he went to Wuhan, brought him to Mamallapuram. I don't know what the two talked. But if you saw their body language, you will think that these two gentlemen will never go to war, will never have any differences with each other. But it was palpable. The differences were palpable. And after each talk, each conversation, India would make some concessions to China. Not big concessions, small concessions. Like after the meeting in Wuhan, the government of India did not send a representative to the Dalai Lama's birthday. Small thing, but for China, very, very important, because Dalai Lama is the key to India-China differences. So if we are willing to forget our good friend, the Dalai Lama, for a year at least, was a big gesture to them. We had the experience of Doklam on the India-China-Bhutan border, where the Chinese were building a road on what is considered to be Bhutan territory, and we have a treaty relationship with Bhutan. So naturally, we had to resist it. And we stopped them. And they are supposed to have agreed to withdraw, but we know that they have not withdrawn. They are still there, but they are not building a bridge yet. So we stopped talking about it after the Wuhan visit, as though everything is smooth. It is not. If you look at satellite pictures, they are still there. That was the second concession. Third concession, we did not join the BRI, but we stopped shouting about it. We are quiet about it. But what has China done in return? I haven't seen any evidence of any Chinese concession. What they continued to do was to complain about our relationship with the US. They say, we are your neighbors next door to you. More than 1 billion people like you. Why are you going all the way, crossing 7 oceans to find a friend in the United States? This was their repeated argument with us. But can we trust the Chinese? That would have been very foolish for any prime minister to do. They were also worried that there was an understanding, at least at the time of President Barack Obama, that United States, India, Japan, and Australia, which is now called the Quadrilateral, or the 4 countries, working together to see what we can do about China. But after President Trump came, he quietly withdrew from it. He didn't talk about it. He's more worried about Afghanistan, because he has promised his people that he will bring back the soldiers before the next election. He tried all various tricks to get Taliban to form a government or agree with the others, join together, get Pakistan into it. And so his focus was not on China. His focus was on Afghanistan and the help that he can get from Pakistan. So having accused Pakistan of terrorism, of misusing money for anti-terrorist activities, Donald Trump became more involved with the Pakistanis to resolve the Afghan issue. Even today, his focus is that Pakistan must get situation created in Afghanistan which would enable United States to withdraw. So we have on the one hand the fear that if Pakistan helps in setting up a Taliban government in Afghanistan and becomes a partner of the United States, all that we have invested in Afghanistan in terms of building their parliament house and schools and universities and hospitals will all go, because Taliban was in the government earlier also. At that time, they almost destroyed everything that was Indian, including Buddha statues in Afghanistan. They banned music, they banned education. Are we ready for another Afghanistan of that kind with the support of Pakistan? What will happen to terrorism? What will happen to Kashmir? So that set of issues where we were dealing with the United States to make sure that Afghanistan is properly settled and not left in a mess. On the other hand, we knew that the Chinese had every intention to dominate us. And whenever the Chinese have come onto the border and created problems, they used to say that this is to teach India a lesson. Even in 1962, they said this is to teach India a lesson. And that, what is that lesson? And Dokalam in 2017, the Chinese said again that we are teaching India a lesson. They never tell you what that lesson is. But we know that lesson, which is that don't think that India can take the leadership of Asia. For them, India is not the rival. They are already superior to us in so many ways. There is no equality between India and China, not even in trade. We have $75–80 billion trade with China. But it's all junk that you buy from China. All the apps and TikToks and mosquito killers sold to us at very low prices. And telecommunication, Huawei, which the whole world fears. But if I open this, inside it is written there, Huawei. In today's Hindu, Mr. M.K. Narayanan has written about isolating China and the reality. It's very difficult to isolate China. We can ban a few things, we can cancel some business deals, but look at our involvement in pharmaceuticals, for example, in communications, for example. So our effort has always been to be friendly with China. And we also know that we cannot be friendly with China, friendly in the sense of not being cordial, but to do business. You know, if you're a gunda next door whom you cannot fight, what do? You send some Diwali sweets to the gunda, right? What else can you do? You cannot fight him. So we were trying to build up a relationship which can be business as usual, even when the major issue of the border is remaining unsettled. I was a college student in 1962 when the war took place. And when they took away 40,000 square kilometers of territory in Aksai Chin, we as students shout slogans saying, "We shall not speak to the Chinese till we get this land back." Have they returned any land? Still in 1988, Rajiv Gandhi signed an agreement with the Chinese to say that, okay, we'll wait for the border agreement to come. We would like the border to be demarcated, but we are willing to wait for that. But that should not be held hostage to good relations between us. And the Chinese jumped at it. India is saying, okay, let the border remain. We'll do other things. This is exactly opposite of Pakistan. What is Pakistan telling us? Resolve the Kashmir issue, otherwise we have nothing to do with you. we will destroy you, we will terrorize you, we'll fight on the border. And we did the exact opposite. We said we will not fight, we will not raise issues. In the meantime, let us have a normal relationship. As a result, our trade increased. In the United Nations, we did several things together because as two developing countries, we have common interests in trade, in environment. And in 1993, we went one step further because Narasimha Rao signed an agreement saying that we shall have peace and tranquility on the border. Have the Chinese maintained peace and tranquility? We recognized what is called line of actual control. This was a Chinese idea. What is line of actual control? Nothing. There is no line. It's an imaginary line which, by convention, we accept that this is our part and this other part, subject to final settlement. In many areas, Chinese and Indian troops are facing each other on a daily basis. There's not peace. And then anything significant happens in the world or in India-China relations, these soldiers will come into our territory, create chaos, get some bulls and cows or spend some time, and then we scream and shout and then they go back. How much do they go back? They take 2 steps in and they go back 1 step. So 1 step is already in their hands. This is what's called a salami tactics. You know, when you cut a fish, you cut into smaller pieces so that you can swallow it. You can't swallow the whole fish. And this has been going on. Sometimes there has been conflicts. In 1967, there was a big conflict. People died. After that, we decided that we will not use guns. But look what they did. They killed 20 of our soldiers, including a colonel, without firing a shot. They killed them cruelly, hit them with raw, crude weapons, metal sticks with thorns on it. So why did they do that? Why did they do it at this time? When all of us were engaged in saving our lives in the times of Corona. We keep saying we don't understand the Chinese. We have so many experts on China. We have so many Chinese speakers. Confucius centers are there in India to promote China culture. But did anyone predict that these people will do this at this time? So what did we do? Prime Minister devised a formula very quickly, how to deal with this particular situation. On the one hand, from 5th of April, when we first came to know about it, we said we are ready to talk at any level. So, foreign ministers level, commanders level, even junior commanders level. And the Chinese said, yes, we'll talk. And having occupied many places inside our territory, they said, we will talk. And what is the purpose of this talk? To restore the status quo. There's nothing else in that talk. Go back to April 5th and then everything is over. But what happened? They agreed. And then when our troops empty-handedly went there to watch the disengagement, they brutally killed them. Because we also are supposed to have killed many Chinese, but those figures have not been disclosed. And then they said again, our national security advisor and the Chinese foreign minister, they talked. And they again said, we'll disengage. But have they disengaged? No. They are still occupying considerable territory of India and saying, yes, we will disengage. Same old trick. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That is why the Prime Minister had to go to the border and say the second strategy. He said, Lord Krishna played his flute for peace and friendship and love and affection. But he also had a Sudarshan Chakra with which he could destroy. And that is India. He told them that. So what did you do? What did he do after that? He asked the French to send us the Rafale aircraft earlier. He told the Russians to send us the S-400 missile earlier. We told the Americans that we might need you. All of them came to our help. All of them said, yes, we'll support you. We'll give you. Because all of them are equally worried about Chinese intentions in the future. So that is the second thing he did. First, negotiations still going on. Secondly, preparations for war. He knows very well that we are not a balanced armies. China is 20 years ahead of us in everything. Technology, arms, ammunition, nuclear weapons, everything. But does it mean that we have to say that no, we will be peaceful, we will do nothing? So we told them very clearly that yes, we are not going to let this happen anymore. And that is at least keeping the Chinese there. They are not taking any further action. And the third thing that India did, this is what the emerging foreign policy of India. He said, don't take us for granted that we will have this trade with you. Don't think that we are dependent on you for everything. So he decided to reduce our dependence on China. In spite of all the shouting and screaming taking place inside India, saying that don't do this, don't do that, the Chinese, we need them, or we need pharmaceuticals, we need this, that, and the other. The Prime Minister said, yes, I understand, I recognize all this. But at the same time, we have to give a very strong signal. And that is why, starting with the 59 Chinese apps, to which we are all addicted. We think that we cannot survive without TikTok. We cannot survive with all these games that they let us play on our mobiles. But we managed. 59 apps removed. What happened? Did India collapse? Now there are bigger TikToks, better TikToks in India than Chinese TikTok. But they lost billions of dollars. And we cancelled some contracts. But at the same time, we have not declared a trade war against the Chinese. Because trade wars, nobody wins. Everybody loses in trade wars. There was the Opium War of the old days, the Banana War, and more recently, India-US war on trade. Where did it all go? Both sides lost money and business. And finally, they find a compromise. So we didn't go for a trade war with China. What we have done is a modulated, synchronized, and thoughtful changes in our economic relationship with China. Because China is saying you are losing yourself, you are committing suicide. But fair enough. So where do we go from here on China? Is the biggest challenge of 2020. Suppose they don't leave. They don't go back. What choices do we have? We cannot take our nuclear weapons. As I said earlier, nobody can use nuclear weapons against anybody anymore. Our army is very well prepared now to fight in the Himalayas, which we were not in 1962. So there can be a war, but war is not a solution. That's why I said India's foreign policy towards China is three-pronged. conversation, military strength, and economic measures. And this policy towards China is under test, under severe test at this point. Because once the mountains are snowbound, no action will take place. The Chinese will just sit there. And Indian, particularly the opposition, will scream and shout and say that you have surrendered territory to China. The economic measures will take a long time to materialize. And being conscious of that, we have evolved this policy. Is there an alternative to this policy is what is engaging the minds of people, and that is what we should all be engaged in. Try and evolve an alternative. There is an alternative to learn or pick a leaf from the Pakistani policy towards India. That is, say that we need to resolve the border problem. And if you don't resolve the border problem, we have nothing to do with you. We will not cooperate with you in the UN. We will not support you on your economic activities. Can we do that? Doubtful. Just as we have not accepted the Pakistani position that we will resolve Kashmir, just because they said they will not deal with us. Same thing will happen. So, China is the most important threat or the challenge that India has in 2020. And what has been the result of this overall? I'll stop with that. India's stock has increased, not decreased in this process. Most nations of the world have said that China should not have done this, particularly at this time, whatever be the quarrel. But with one difference, Russia is not supporting us. Russia is our best friend, all-weather friend, and so on and so on. But when it comes to China, they did not support us in '62. They have not supported us today. So we have to take account of that. The United States is only too eager to support. That's also dangerous. So if we identify ourselves completely with the United States, then the threat from China will be more, because they will realize that they have to beat India before they beat the United States. But on the whole, in spite of the humiliation involved in this Chinese incursion, India's stock has gone up. And we have more friends. The Australians are totally disillusioned with the Chinese. Because Japan was always ready to be with us rather than on you. And even Mr. Trump is keeping quiet. He's not saying America first, so we don't want to anger the Chinese, etc. Of course, he is busy with his own problems. But one thing we should remember is that the United States is not going to disappear from the face of the earth. In spite of the pandemic, in spite of all the mistakes he made, and the millions of people he got butchered by his activities, US has certain infinite strength. And that will come, whether Donald Trump wins the election or Joseph Biden wins the elections. So the Chinese is an illusion that they can step into the vacuum created by the United States. And therefore, we have international support. We have built up our strength, and we have initiated a certain amount of economic restrictions. And we are also taking care of Pakistan, because Pakistan and China are in collaboration with each other. The Chinese are saying that all this happened because of what we did in Jammu and Kashmir. because Ladakh and that area, China has a particular interest. And they say we have unilaterally changed the situation in Jammu and Kashmir with Pakistan's support. And Pakistan, it's almost a year since Pakistan has been agitating, taking us to the United Nations, etc. Nothing has worked. And so the connection between Pakistan and China on this issue is very significant. And therefore, we are keeping Pakistan under control. We don't have to worry about Pakistan when it comes to war. We have fought several wars. Every war we have won. Now they have nuclear weapons. We have nuclear weapons, but that will not be used. But what will happen is the conventional strength that we have and the information that we have about Pakistan's internal situation. So we are all right there. So we have faced with a new situation in 2020. And all this has happened has to be seen in the context of our 75 years of foreign policy. I'm not going to history at all. But all this would not have been possible had it not been for Nehru's days and Mrs. Gandhi's days and Rajiv Gandhi's days. And that continuity we must realize has a great advantage for us. India was never an expansionist country in history. Nobody will believe they say that India is doing this in order to expand its empire. Why? Because Pandit Nehru was there, because our policy is there. So what is happening in India's foreign policy today, the emerging trends, we have to see it directly in the context of what we have accomplished. The Bangladesh war was very significant historically. We created a new country. We divided Pakistan and survived it. International condemnation was strong, but then we survived it. Now Bangladesh is fully recognized by every country in the world. So that historic strength of India's foreign policy and our readiness to deal with dynamic situations through dynamic foreign policy has brought us so far here. And our relationship with the rest of the world, whether it is European Union or whether it is ASEAN or whether it is the Pacific, things are normal and things are doing well. And in the collapse of the global economy, we'll have a lot of suffering in the next 1 or 2 or 3 years. Even if the pandemic ends, even if the vaccine is found, we will have a terrible time. There's no question about it. But I think we have the strength to deal with it because of the past. So only politicians will say all this started with this man and all that ended with that man, etc. It's not so. What has made Indian foreign policy success is our values, our democratic traditions, our transfer of power during the elections. All these have given a great strength, what we call the soft power or the smart power of India. And we cannot do without hard power either. So we built our nuclear weapons, right thing to do. So every prime minister has contributed to what we are today. And the person in charge when a crisis comes, he has to be tested against the whole background, whether he has been able to preserve it. And that is what I think India is doing today. And therefore we have no reason to fear, but we have every reason to be concerned. Coronavirus or otherwise. And that every nation has to do. And that's what it is. It is a difficult time for India and the world, but I'm sure that we'll survive this crisis also. So maybe I'll stop here and answer your questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. We have got many things about the current scenario regarding the Indian foreign policy, sir. Sir, we can take some few questions from the audience, from the participants. Sir, what is the relevance of SAARC right now? That is one question, sir.
Right. Let me answer that.
Yes.
Well, regional cooperation is very significant in current history. But unfortunately for us, we do not have regional cooperation as of today. SAARC is a mere formality because our heart is not in it, basically because of the India-Pakistan problem. Because anything that you do in SAARC immediately impinges on Pakistan. They will say this is Kashmir, and we will say this is terrorism, and that is the end of the debate. And the others don't say anything. This is the problem. And for that reason, we decided not to go to the STAR conference in Islamabad. So therefore, the SAARC is more or less dead. But Mr. Modi took care when this big disaster of COVID-19 came. He gave up all those reservations and called a conference of SAARC leaders. But Pakistan missed that opportunity. The Prime Minister did not come. They sent the Health Minister, came here and talked about Kashmir. And that was the end of SAARC again. Because some cooperation is going on because we pledged $10 billion and $10 million and the others have put in some money and some cooperation is taking place. But that golden opportunity, Pakistan itself has destroyed it. And so not relevant and it will not be relevant unless our internal problems are resolved. It has to be like European Union or ASEAN, where you have some unity in policy. Otherwise, you cannot have a regional organization. Otherwise, it will be like African Union. They call them African Union, but there is no union. So SAARC is also similar, and it will come up only if these bilateral relations are resolved.
Yes. Sir, one more question. It is regarding India-Iran relationship. What are the recent moves and what went wrong so that Iran is moving close to China recently?
Yes, the answer is very simple. Money, cash. See, Iran was working with us when things were normal, when they could sell their oil, they could do various things. But when the Iranian agreement was broken by President Trump, then they became desperate. Why did they sign that agreement? Because they were in deep trouble economically. Otherwise, how would they go and sign such a humiliating treaty? Because they wanted nuclear weapons, at least for 15 years, they will not be able to make any nuclear weapons. They accepted that merely for economic benefit. Then the Americans said, no economic benefit. You sign, fine, but we are going to throw it out and we'll impose sanctions against you. So what does Iran do? They did not want to go war with the United States. And they are trying to cultivate people who can ignore the American demands and help them. And we are in no position to completely ignore American demands. If the Americans say, if you support Iran, we will not work with you, and that is not something that we can accept. So we are trying to be soft. We are continuing our cooperation. We are still buying oil, not all the oil, while China has no such concern. So they are willing to throw in their money. And in spite of the fact that Iran is an Islamic country and all that, they are not even worrying about it. And therefore, what they thought they may not be able to get from India, they are getting it from Iran. But we are still, Chabahar port is still ours. It is only a connecting rail link that the Iranians say they will do on their own. But this is still being negotiated. I don't think the matter is over. But they are just demonstrating it to you that they have other options. And everybody has other options. What can you do about it? But Iran friendship, I have written about it. I have always been very doubtful about Iran's commitment to us. The civilizational linkage is one thing, but their Islamic linkage is much stronger. So civilization is water, but Islam is like blood. So we could really not have, we have this, fairy tale notion about Iran being a great friend. But inside that, there are wheels within wheels. And that is what we are seeing.
Sir, one more question. Should India still continue with principles of NAM despite China's interference and interferences by other neighboring countries of India triggered by China's influence, and why?
No, it has nothing to do with NAM. Did you say go back to NAM? No, well, NAM is a different, it was in a different context. See, that was to stop the Cold War, as it were, or make use of the Cold War. That was the purpose. So the political meaning of NAM has, in a sense, disappeared with the end of the Cold War. We said there should not be blocks. Now there are no blocks, only one block. So it is true that non-aligned, in the sense of independence of judgment, is still valid. Whether it's one block, two blocks, three blocks, you can be independent. And that is why we don't call it NAM anymore. We say strategic autonomy. So strategic autonomy is the correct word, not non-alignment. So that exists. We deal with people on the basis of merits, and that is recognized. But one mistake Mr. Modi did was not going to the non-aligned summit in Venezuela. He went all around the world, but he said, I have no time to go. Because that was a signal to the non-aligned countries, these 111 or 112 countries. There was never a non-aligned summit without the Indian Prime Minister. But Mr. Modi's view was that, we are too big, we are too important, and we have to be in good terms with the big guys. And we don't need to go around with these 111 countries hanging around us. That was his approach. But I think he has already changed that. Because after the problems he had with China and Russia, he also went to Singapore. He talked about, and this time there was a NAM meeting in, conference meeting, he attended it. So I have always been of the view that a country must have constituencies, whatever it is. So to say that we are the leaders of, or at least one of the leaders of the non-aligned movement was a point. And that, I think, is being rectified. There was a little mistake there. I have written about it. We should not have ignored this huge constituency we have. We may not think very highly of our links with them, but they think very highly of India's links with them. So you're right. We may have to go to, but I wouldn't say that is the reason for our present problems.
Yes, sir. Sir, one question from Mr. Ram Victor. Sir, could we lose our relation with Sri Lanka due to new leadership in Sri Lanka?
Well, which leadership has been friendly with us? Because we have a problem in Sri Lanka because we are not just dealing with Sri Lanka. We are dealing with the Tamil population of India. Right? China can be very friendly with Sri Lanka, Pakistan can be, because they don't have a Tamil issue. Here we have a huge problem of 50 million Tamils in India who are hurt by what is happening to the Tamils in Sri Lanka. How can we close our eyes to that? That is why. But during the decisive war, we actually closed our eyes. You know that. We didn't participate in the war, and that was the best we could do to Sri Lanka. That India did not participate in the war. We kept quiet, and so Prabhakaran was killed. Right? But we kept telling them, the problems will not be resolved by your killing Prabhakaran or eliminating the tigers. You must have a political solution, and that the Sri Lankan leadership has not accepted so far. And they think they can manage it by saying, we have no minorities, we are all one. But one Prabhakaran will be born again, unless they solve the political problem. This is the difference that we have with Sri Lankans on their internal issue. But externally, different presidents, Sri Lankan presidents have different tactics. The two brothers, Rajapakshas, who have now come to power, have always been very, very strong with the Tamils. And therefore, they were not very fond of India. But they know the compulsions of India and Sri Lanka having to work together. But then he left and Sirisena came. We thought, and he declared that he'll be closer to India, but eventually he also became pro-China because of all the goodies that he was getting from the Chinese. So emotionally, Buddha linkages we have, every Sri Lankan president will go to Bodh Gaya, even if he doesn't go to Delhi. So we have very close linkages. And now that the Tamil problem has no leadership, etc., they are feeling comfortable. But they should not take that comfort for granted and try and listen to what Rajiv Gandhi told them. Bring in the amendment to the constitution, give them self-rule. Now they think that since they have won the war, they don't need to do any of these things. And China will be helpful to them because they have a case in front of the Human Rights Commission. And if it council, and if it goes to the UN Security Council, they have the veto of the Chinese. India does not have a veto in the United Nations. So they are getting closer to China, money, support internationally, and they think that, of course, India is a brother, we can take care of them. That is how the relationship. But Rajapakshas, now both of them have come to power and they have a complete majority in parliament and so on. They have made very friendly noises with us. Our High Commissioner has met the President and reassured them that we will work with them. But the Sri Lankan element, the Tamil element, will remain as a problem.
Sir, there is one question from Manikandan. It is regarding the status of Chabahar Port, sir.
So Chabahar Port is a joint venture by India and Iran, and it's going on. And we have invested, I don't know how, 150 million US dollars or something. And that will be very good because we get access to the rest of the world without having to go through Pakistan or Afghanistan. And then we wanted a linkage from Chabahar to a port in Afghanistan. That was the rail link that we were supposed to build. Now the Iranians say that we will build it ourselves. They have not given it to China. But at the same time, they are signing, I don't think they have signed it yet, a long-term strategic relationship with China, which is new. And that will change the relationship with India considerably. So they are playing what is called the China card against us. But again, as I said earlier, because of the strength of our foreign policy and our diplomacy, we'll survive that also. We'll deal with the Iranians in some form or the other.
Yes, sir. Sir, one question. What are the possible changes that can come in foreign policy of India in a post-COVID-19 world?
Well, this is what I was outlining. I mean, nobody can sit down and say, because we don't know what the post-COVID world is going to be. Do you know? Do you know what the population of the world will be? We have no idea. COVID-19 has not in. So, right from day one, people used to ask me, what about post-COVID world? What is the post-COVID world? I always say, let us see what the post-COVID world is like. There will be big changes in financial, economic balance of the world, power balance. Everything will change. So, what I said was, so far we have handled it well. And we have an upper hand. In fact, there is a talk of India becoming the leader of the fight against COVID and all that, because that was initial stages. You know, Kerala health minister was getting awards and so on. Now nobody is giving her any awards because the situation has changed. But whatever we could do, we have done well in the eyes of the world. They know the problem. They all predicted that India will have a huge crisis, which we are going through at this point in time. And therefore, it has to evolve. So my feeling is that our getting close to the US, getting close to the Quad, Australia, etc., getting close to Europe, etc., are good signs. And after all, what is our objective in our foreign policy? We don't want to dominate the world, but we want a multipolar world. We don't want a unipolar, bipolar, or tripolar world. We want the major countries to be the pillars of the world. And we would like to be one of the pillars without being party to some other pillar. The US, China, European Union, Japan, these are all going to be the pillars. So India certainly has a place as the sixth pillar in this new setup. That's what we got. And if that is our objective, what has happened so far after COVID came are not bad for us. There is, in spite of the China problem, we have good signs in our reputation internationally.
Yes, sir. So one question from Manikandan, it's regarding whether China is forming Quad with Pak, Nepal, Afghan against India at recent past.
Well,
In the recent past.
maybe, who knows? They already had one, Iran, Turkey, and Pakistan. You remember at one point? Where is it? It's gone. And now with the Malaysia, etc., they started to try to start another Islamic group, and in the process, poor Malaysians lost out. So people make all this, but what is Nepal and so on compared to Australia, Japan, and the United States? So maybe they have a plan like that. They may announce a Quad. Who knows? But all that is not going to make any difference. The Quad is not a formal group. We are in the SCO also, Shanghai Cooperation, where Chinese are there, Russians are there. So we are in every group. We have a multi-aligned approach and not a non-aligned approach. Multi-aligned approach basis of strategic autonomy. That is our policy. And we will continue to do that and deal with these issues as they come.
Yes. Sir, one question from Satyamurthy. Recently, Turkey is also stated showing the negative face towards India. What made it to do so?
Well, this is linked with so many factors. Basically, the Pakistan factor. Turkey, as you know, at one time was an ally of Pakistan. And then Turkey is under pressure from the Western countries. And all this are reflecting in every activity of Turkey. But it is not a logical activity, like destroying the thousands of year old or church and making it a mosque and things that they are rather irrational. So you are not able to fully explain what Mr. Erdogan is up to. But certainly some of the things, first of all, his objective is to become a big power in the Middle East, in West Asia. And he was hoping that the Americans and the Russians, etc., will lead them to do that. But since he has been so mercurial in his ways, they don't trust him too much. So they also interfere in that. So he probably thinks that India may not work with Turkey in this context, and therefore they are trying to contain India also. But that's not hostile. They're not hostile to us.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I hope all the questions are answered. So now we have a word of thanks, sir. So my warm greetings to everyone present here. I'm Gautaman M., faculty from the Department of Political Science, Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. T P Sreenivasan, IFS, for this motivating and informative session. Sir, thank you so much for taking out time of your busy schedule for us and educating the young aspirants. This insightful session has given us very good understanding about the significance and various changes in Indian foreign policy and the impact of Indo-China relations in various phases of international relations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank Mr. Chandrasekhar, Head Academic, Shankar IAS Academy. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the participation, sir. And I would like to thank KCLAS and the Kumaraguru institutions for organizing this wonderful webinar series for students, faculty, and civil service aspirants. Also, I would like to extend thanks to Shankar IAS Academy, who have been the backbone of this whole program, and our knowledge partner, Takshashila Institution, for their contribution and support. Last but not the least, I thank all the participants, the aspirants, and wholeheartedly welcome you to join this evening at 5 p.m. for the session on the topic India's National Security by Mr. Hormis Saragan, IPS. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Shankar IAS Academy holds its core values integral to the culture of learning and innovation.
We offer